Hi, so in this video I want to show you where we store the data for the Business Management Benchmarks project. Last video we talked about GitHub and this project Business Management Benchmarks, which is where we store the source code and information for the project. But where is the data itself that we're stored? So if you scroll down here to the README for this repo, there's a link to Business Management Benchmarks database at Dolt. So if you click on this link down here, it will take you over to another website which is called Dolt. And this is in spirit similar to GitHub. It's a place to store data in the form of databases. So the type of database behind this project or this website is called a MySQL database or MySQL database, and that's a type of database. It's a relational database where the data is stored in tables. So our database is an example of that, and you can run various SQL queries against this database to organize it, organize the data in various ways and present it or view it in various ways. So SQL databases are huge, and they're the most prominent kind of database. And so we store our company data and our financials in this kind of database as well too. So once you're on the website here, you go to a URL that contains the username for the database. So this database belongs to me, calvinw. And then the name of the database is just Business Management Benchmarks. So if you go to that repo in Dolt, you'll be on this page right here. So for this database, you can do various things. You can view the tables that are in it and view the data. You can actually manipulate the data on this website and also edit it as well if you needed to make changes to this database. This is a regular website. Like GitHub, you can sign up and get an account, and once you do, you'll be able to make your own databases as well too, as long as they're open source and they're you don't have any private data in them. You can store your database on Dolt. If you needed to use a private data or database, you would have to pay for this website. But as long as you have just public data and you want to put it into a database, an SQL database, there's no charge for that. Now the thing about this data is it's accessible via a URL, so everybody can click on it and see what the different tables contain, and that's not a problem for us because our financial data was all publicly available to begin with. We downloaded it from places like the SEC anyway, so we're just arranging the data in a particular way, and in particular we're standardizing the terms for it, and that's really our main point. So I'm just going to give you a little tour of this database so you have a feel for what this data looks like. And the nice thing about this database is it allows things like the large language models. If you're using them to create web apps with or create applications with, the large language models can figure out how to access this data really easily because it is stored on the web. So it's all available through various URLs that the LLM can understand and put into its code as it's creating a web app to, say, display the data in various ways. So if we look at the different tables, there's just a few tables in our data. The main one here is called financials. A table is like a spreadsheet, really. It's a tabular display of some data, and usually SQL databases are made up of a number of tables where you store different parts of your data, and then when you get ready to use the data, sometimes what you do is you tie the different tables together in various ways and display the tables in some kind of combined form. And that's part of what SQL is all about. It gives you a way to organize the data and aggregate it and ask questions about it. So at any rate, this website is really well done. in terms of letting you view the data and display it, and also manipulate it in various ways as well too, without really leaving this web page. So if you click on the tables part over here, if you click on this little go button over here, it will show you this table, and basically it just looks like a spreadsheet. There you can kind of see the rows and the columns, right? And the rows are different company names and years, and then the columns over here are the various financials that we've collected for these companies. And the thing that's different about our display is that we've gone ahead and extracted these values from the SEC's website, but then we standardize them under a particular naming scheme up here. So now you can compare the different companies according to the different values they have, and the data is not really reported with different names for different companies. So this is a standardized view of the data that was already kind of out there in those SEC reports, but we've made it and organized it in a way that's really handy to compare company to company and so on. So if you look at it, it's just stored, each row here, you can kind of tell what it represents. It's the company and the year, and then the report date. So the report date is, for most companies, it's early in the year. So you can see down here, here's some report dates that are February and January. And so that usually, if the 10K gets reported early in the year, then the data is from the year before. So here's an example of a company that reports in early February, and so we label the data as being 2019, even though the data kind of goes up to this report date right here. So it might go up to like maybe a month or 2 months into the new year, but primarily the data represents 2019. So we're just going to go ahead for the year and label it as 2019. And you can see the companies that report kind of at the beginning of the year usually do it on similar time frames, like this is early February or late January for this company. And then there are other companies that report later in the year. So here, ASOS up here reports at the end of August, and so this is somewhat common as well too. And when that happens, we just label the year of the data as 2019. Again, it's data that goes from a year back from this date right here. So it's primarily 2019, but in this case it would be a few months in 2018 as well too. But we're just going to label it as 2019. So at any rate, that's the financials table for our data. And you might just be interested in just the raw financials if you were going to do something. But more likely, if you were going to compare these different companies, you would want to look at something that we call the metrics, financial metrics. And if you click on that table, what you're going to see is you're going to see, again, the company names and the years, kind of like before. But now you see all these calculated values. So these are calculations that came from using those financials that we just looked at. So if you remember over here, we have the raw values for the financials. Cost of goods is there. If you take that and divide by this net revenue, for example, you get that financial metric. So let's go back to the financial metrics. You get cost of good percentage, SGA percentage, gross margin percentage, and so on. And then if you look over here, you'll see those turnover rates as well, and then there's the different ratios. There's sales current year versus last year, debt to equity, again, kind of a ratio. So these are, we call these metrics or calculated fields. And the web page that we looked at last time, we called them financial indicators, I think. So that's stored in the second table, the financial metrics. Then there's also metrics for the segments and the subsegments. These are just aggregations for those values we just looked at. Here's the department store aggregate for 2018 for cost of goods percentage. Here's the gross margin percentage over here for that year as well. This is an aggregated value for all of the department stores for that year. And so this table's not that big. It's got all of the different segments over the years that we have data for. Basically, our data goes 2018 up to current time. And then also, because they're subsegments as well too, there's a table that has the subsegments and also their aggregated values as well too. So all the companies that are in the subsegment accessories and shoes would have gone into the calculation for this subsegment ratio or percentage. There's a few other things you can kind of look at in this table. Once you're on one of the tables, you can download the data as a CSV file or an Excel file, which is really great. If you go back to the original kind of financials, if you come up here, there's a little query window. You can put in, if you want to filter by particular columns, say you just want to see the net revenue, let's say company name, and also year. Oh, I don't know why it's making that capital. Hopefully it's okay. And then the net revenue. Maybe you're just interested in the net revenue. Let's see. And now if I run this is called an SQL query. And if I run that, it gives me, just the columns that I was interested in. So it's a full application for editing your database up here, as long as you can come up with the SQL code to do this. Of course, you can have the LLM create this query code for you, and that's a really great example of using an LLM to edit a database by having it create this kind of code for you. Now, where we're going to use this is, say we wanted to display this on a web page, we would have to have a way for the LLM to get this data out of the database to do that, and we'll come back to this, but there's a link over here that you can click on that kind of shows you what the URL that has this data looks like. If you click on this over here, this is the URL that we would give to the LLM, or the LLM would know how to create, and it would be the equivalent of downloading all of that data that we just looked at in a format that's called JSON, which is kind of similar to CSV or spreadsheet data. And it's just an organized way to present the data. But this is also a really convenient method for the LLMs to get the data from this database. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about how to create web apps that use this data. But you can come to this website and play around with it. Because it's my database and I own it, you wouldn't be able to actually edit the fields in here. But if you created your own databases, you would of course be able to edit those. And there's a whole kind of method for editing the database and then kind of committing those changes in a safe way. This is called a version controlled database. It's very similar to GitHub. Projects on GitHub are version controlled as well too. That means that in case you screw something up, you can always back up to a previous version. So it has that kind of feature as well too. So next time we'll talk a little bit about how we extracted the standardized forms for the financials using a large language model.